Painting model railway figures is something that many of us shy away from. But let's have a look here in part 1 at how an expert does it. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie, and we're not in my railway room in Somerset today. We're actually up in Herefordshire with Dan Evason from Tunnel Lane Model Railways. Now, I mentioned in a previous video that I was going to sort of enhance our figure painting skills, but there's a twist here because my skills are really embryonic. But Dan is going to show me and perhaps us how we can do it. So, Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, hi, Charlie. Right, okay, myself. So I am a full-time figure painter. I'm a full-time building painter, layout building, magazine writing. So I write for Hornby magazine, doing how-to articles each month. So you may have seen them in there as well, possibly. So yes, that's basically what I do. Predominantly for Model U. So through Model U, you can order your figures and it gets sent to me to be painted. Same with MS Models with the buildings. Just say with obviously the layout building we do as well. So you can ring me up and give me a message, and we can look at building your layout too as well. So yeah, all different aspects of basically the model railway industry I can do.
So you work closely with Model U. So do Model U sell painted figures?
No, they don't. No,
right.
No. They basically print off resin. Colour printing will come out at some point. It's getting there slowly, but we're not there yet really. So the better option is to basically send them to me to be painted. So yeah, I paint figures for all over the world, all different scales, sizes, gauges, the lot, you name it.
And how long have you been doing this professionally?
At least 4 years, I think. And yeah, 4 years now I've been doing it professionally. I've always been into model making full stop. So right back in the beginnings, it was military, tanks and jeeps and all the stuff, but I really enjoy doing the scenic stuff. And then basically with the figures, with Tamiya, so gluing all the arms and legs on, and rifles and stuff. And then obviously fast forward now, 3D printed resin figures, and I paint an awful lot of those. So yeah.
So going back a few years, you get the metal figures.
Yes, yeah.
You get the old plasticky figures,
yes,
let's say from Dapol, Airfix, that kind of thing. And then obviously now you get the 3D printed figures from companies such as Model U.
Yeah.
Are metal figures a thing of the past?
I think there's a definite style to them, put it this way. I think if you have a white metal figure and you have a resin figure, they are like night and day together, really. So I think once you started on one path, it's probably best to stick with that path. But I would definitely recommend, if you're starting from fresh, go with resin. You don't need lots of figures to create a nice railway. You just need a few to sort of set the scene. Also, again, obviously with Model U, they are all scanned real figures, so all nice natural poses, where the ones you buy sort of pre-made, come from China sort of thing, they're all sort of standard poses, and everybody has that same person looking in the same way.
And what about those dreadful little figures you can find on eBay? And they're kind of smaller than HO.
Yes.
But I've got some to go into coaches because I find kind of the proper size figures seem too big to go into your Hornby Mark 1 coaches. Do you find that?
Yeah, So any sort of this pre-bought sort of come from China doesn't always fit, does it really? And they always look a bit odd with extra long legs or arms, or debatable whether they are adults or
So who do you suggest buying from to fill your coaches then? Oh, sorry, not fill, because it'll cost you an absolute fortune.
Well, again, with Model U, they do a range of figures for different wagons and coaches. They obviously work alongside Rapido a lot as well. So a lot of there's fit, spot on. Obviously, they deal with a lot of the main companies. So I would recommend possibly, like those really. I'll go with the resin figures, the fitment.
Okay. The figures you can buy from Bachmann, they do little packs, don't they, of 5 and all the rest of it, and they're all brightly coloured.
Yes.
Can you do much with those? Can you sort of darken them down or make them a little bit more realistic?
You could repaint them, I suppose. It's just the fact that they're quite, the definition of the detail is not there. That's the trouble. Yeah. So possibly trying to repaint them on top of that paint, it may be an issue with them being quite a waxy finish to them. If you had a massive station, then maybe fine, use a few days sort of thing. But if you want to go from being a train set to a model railway, then I would perhaps suggest looking at another option.
Okay, so if we were to sort of push down the Model U avenue, and I've got some Model U figures I'm very pleased with, I must confess. Do you wash them or anything to start with?
No, straight in. So this has always been a thing. Of obviously, we do the exhibitions, and people always come up here and ask this question. And the trouble is, they are from an old mindset, from where you see like the old Airfix or Dapple figures, where they are injected molded into a greasy mold, and then you should really wash them. Model U or any resin 3D printed figure is washed in IPA after it's done, so it is as clean as a whistle. Unless you have be a Greg sausage roll and got greasy fingers, or chips or whatever else, then obviously don't touch them. But no, you don't need to wash them, straight onto the resin and away to go.
Right. Okay. So we've got our little figures now. Some people use airbrushes and some people don't. Now I understand. There are thousands of subscribers with airbrushes. With several airbrushes.
Yes.
And thousands of subscribers without any airbrushes. Do you put an initial airbrush coat down?
No, not at all. So. The figures are so small that they'll be blown away, be on the carpet somewhere writing for that figure. So no, I don't use an airbrush
at all.
Not at all. No.
So you go straight in with your thin down paint and away you go.
Yeah. So there's a different. Later on I'll show you the different techniques of how to do this. But predominantly you do all the work before you put a top coat on. Basically.
Right. So paint.
Yes. Okay.
So
yes.
You're strictly
acrylics. Yeah.
No oils, no enamels or anything, because I like enamels and I use enamels again with an airbrush.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I tend to use those on my buildings or logos and structures, but not my people. So, and who do you? I notice you're having looked at your paint box. You're a Tamiya and a Vallejo kind of guy.
Okay. So yes. So. I have got an airbrush. It's the most mankiest thing ever, but I use it for sort of just general blowing, weathering for buildings or whatever else, really, all layers. But I use Tamiya for that paint, for that kind of process, because it is classed as an acrylic, but it's like a hybrid, so it has got its own thinners. It's not a true acrylic, so I would never use that for figure painting. The only thing I do use it for is the gold, because it's quite thick and gloopy, and when you're doing like buttons and stuff like that, you only want to try and do it once. Trying to get that same point over and over again is the fair chance you're going to miss. But if you do it strike hard, strike sure, basically, and go for one time of getting it right.
And that's your Tamiya kind of
it's
one-off
just like thick,
kind of
thing. Otherwise I don't use it for figure painting. It's just too thick. The idea with this resin or the...
Right, so moving on to acrylic paints. Now, there are companies out there that won't love this comment, but you get frame dirt, you get track dirt, and they're all dirty brown, and I don't get it. I mean, people spend not hundreds of pounds, but people spend a considerable amount of money because they want to do the under frame, so they need frame dirt. They're not going to use track dirt on their frames. To me, I can barely tell the difference. And it's just a
you
farce,
can get
really.
Sucked into buying so much stuff you just don't need.
And I've made that mistake with the little match pot type things and all the rest of it. Now you're a Vallejo pure kind of...
No, but predominantly Vallejo. So way back when I did military, I was using Tamiya. Discovered that wasn't the right way of doing things. Moved across to the Vallejo. So I used my local model shop back then, and they stopped Vallejo paints. And then I find they work really well. I have got a few spurious other makes. I would say they're possibly the same company because the bottle looks very similar. But
this is ammo and things like that.
They all look very similar. Since COVID, the stock levels have always been up and down a little bit. So when you drive 25 miles to the model shop, you'll buy something else because you're not going to come back home.
Well, my children, 33 and 38 years old, when it's Father's Day on my birthday, they buy me a voucher for a shop called Antics.
Right, okay,
And there's one in Plymouth, I think there's one in Stroud, Cardiff and Bristol.
Yes.
And I go in there then and stock up my Vallejo range, as it were, and that's kind of how I bring it on. But it's my skills that need sorting out.
Okay, well,
so that is what we're going to do now. Now you might be wondering about the couple of little marks here on your head. Well, it's nothing serious, but I will explain it at the end of this video.
Okay, so with the figure painting, to start with, obviously with Model U figures, they come with the little supports and scaffolding. I've found trying to paint like this is quite hard because the plastic warms to the heat of your hand and it just ends up falling off the stand. So what I use is a little piece of wood or a bit of cardboard or anything like that, really. And I literally simply is super glue. Don't be afraid to put plenty on, especially where it's like this. If they happen to come in the packet with the figure detached, don't panic. A little spot of glue to their feet, and again, just tack it onto a bit of wood. Just remember, you've got to take them back off at the end of the painting process. So enough glue to hold it on, but not too much that you can't detach them, which has happened before, I must admit. So we literally just wait for it to dry a second. So yeah, once the figure's attached, then you can set about doing the removing the scaffolding or the supports. Always a pair of tweezers, and right where the support touches the skin or the figure is its weakest point. So it's always worth just getting a pair of tweezers and just slowly working around and basically detaching. I would always hold the figure, so when the shock of you breaking the support affects the figure, it doesn't pop off those little supports. So simply by just moving them, doing all the hard work. This applies for any of the gauges or scales. So this chap's holding a paintbrush, so this is always a little bit of a fragile, but yeah, we managed to do it, so that's good. That one there. Okay, so it is fairly flexible, this stuff is. And also, if the chap has a shovel or something like that, just make sure with the tweezers you don't dive in and pull it all out, because that has, again, happened before. Break this off there. If you get real tough bits, you can also use a pair of tweezers, snips, sorry, and break away the snips. There we go. And we're left with the figure. So we're there, happy with it all to go. It's always just worth having a little look and seeing what he's wearing, working out what clothing he's got on. So he's got a little shirt on, a polo shirt on, with dungarees, obviously holding a paintbrush, with work boots. This figure doesn't appear to have a great deal of hair on his head, so predominantly around the sides and not on top. So where do we start from here? So primers, I don't use primers, don't need to. The paint takes straight to the resin. Use acrylic paint, Vallejo, which we've already discussed. So what we'll do to start with is we'll use a little bit of white. So yeah, so the model colour I'm using for this, for just a base coat, is 70951, which is Vallejo matte white. Before we go too far with the paint, we'll talk about the brushes. So there's this sort of misconception that you have to use a very, very fine, small brush when painting. Because we're using acrylic and it's water-based paint, we want to use a fine tip, but with a wide body. So my sort of go-to brush is a size 0. Cost-wise, you can spend as much as you want on brushes, but it's not necessarily going to make you a better painter for it. It's about how you use the paints, really. But mine is just a cheap, sort of £2 brush for your local art supplies, Hobbycraft or whatever else. And I find these work really well for what I need to do. I use this size for O gauge, double O, and even N gauge if you so wish. But it's all about the point and the body holding the moisture in. Obviously, you're using acrylic paint, so that's what I like to use. So first of all, so we go across to the paint. So again, acrylic paint is quite thick out of the bottle. I use a lot of water to thin it right down, makes it more controllable. But say out of the bottle, it is quite thick, and you end up with the right mess. So one sort of note. A lot of it's just playing with the paint, and you want this sort of like milky, creamy consistency, and just not thick. You want it to flow, but be under control. A lot of this is practice over and over again, and it will come to you. So a little mug of water, get some paint on there to start with. At this point, we're not too worried about being necessarily tidy. So we're just literally going to go round and pick it to take some of the paintbrush off. So I use gloves just so I can sort of see what I'm doing with the paint. But just go around and pick out some of the highlights. Take some more of that one. So not too worried about how it all looks. Just sort of pick out some of the highlights like this. So the white's now dried. We're going to move on now to the darker shades, or the low lights. So we're going to use Vallejo black 90950, and again very sort of similar to what we've already done. A little bit of black paint. There we go. Brush again. Again, a bit of water, not too much because we're not too worried about trying to blend it in at the moment. And now we're just going to go back round again. Just pick out just sort of some of the darker areas, the shading. too much water. Like that. Just turn away so I can see myself. So sort of your armpit areas, crutch, anywhere sort of basically any shadows would kind of cast. The more you can do at this point really makes the finished article pop. It's always, you know, this should be enjoyable, this should be, so make sure you're sort of sat comfortable. Good lighting always helps. Okay, and I think that will go as far as we'll go with the highlights and lowlights, so we'll let that dry. Okay. Well, now the shadows are all done, it's ready to move on to the next stage. This is where people sort of struggle, so they tend to paint figures by painting the easy bits first, which then creates problems at the end. So the way I paint is start with the fleshes, then we go to the V of the shirt if they're wearing like a shirt and jacket, and basically paint outwards. So skin, you know, try and be tidy with painting if you can help it. In V of the shirt, in, if you've got a tie, great, straight on down, don't worry about stopping at the bottom of the shirt, you can make a bit of a mess, doesn't matter too much. Then when you paint the jacket, keep working back in on yourself, so the last things you basically paint are his boots or her shoes, depending on what you're painting. Basically just, you know, it's all about making yourself life easy. If you start by trying to do the big bits first, you know, you've got to try and get right in there and try and paint the detail at the end and make a right mess. So this system works for me anyway, at least. So with all the pre-shade now done, we're ready to go on to painting the rest of the details, the facial areas and stuff. Key thing for painting, I would say as well, is people suffer with the shakes. Painting like this is really hard because you're just constantly moving. However, if you paint with two hands or two fingers touching or your wrist touching, when you shake as a whole unit. It works really, really well. It's a bit like a sign writer with his stick, and he paints his writing, has a stick attached to whatever, so nothing really moves. And for me, that works very well. It does take a bit of getting used to how you hold the brush. It feels a bit weird. It's a bit like playing golf, I suppose, but you do get used to it. And yeah, so it's a good technique to sort of try and get yourself talked with. So we'll go on to facial areas. Using a little bit of Vallejo FS31670, which is light flesh, and also beige red, which is 70804 for the two sort of flesh tones. We'll start off then with a little bit of the lighter flesh, just give it a little shake. I think the nozzle's blocked, so we'll do it the old-fashioned way. I've just very carefully, don't need a lot on the brush. Let's say with the paints, really, really thin. You're not trying to paint it in one go. It's all about layers and building up. So we'll just start off with this cheek area, like that. Let's say, not trying to be too neat. Tops of the nose. So basically anywhere light would catch. So top of the nose, chin, forehead, and just basically just. You'll do all this process first, builds up to sort of the grand finale at the end. Right. With the facial paint now highlighted again. So it's very much between the whiter and the pink, to be honest. It's debatable whether it works or not, but I like it, it works for me, so this is what we do. I'm going across now to the beige red. So again, we just start to apply the flesh. This is really thin, so on my glove, it's like almost like coloured water. But with the resin figures being so good printed, the last thing you want to do is fill all the detail full of thick paint. So we're just painting down around his neck area, back of the neck. So when you're using the flesh, don't forget to paint legs and hands and arms, and make sure you have it all covered. You don't want to particularly miss bits. With the paint being so thin, if you start to overlap paint, you end up with this sort of tide line, as I call it, tide effect, which is quite hard to disguise. Okay, so that's the flesh done now, so we'll leave this to dry. So being acrylics, obviously, they do dry pretty quick. You can speed up the process using a hairdryer. That works really, really well. Or if you don't have one, then obviously you just have to sit and wait for a couple of minutes just to let it dry, that's all. Now, with the facial paint now dry, it's time to move on to the rest of his clothing. So, as I said before, he's wearing a polo shirt and a pair of like dungarees. We're going to do him sort of a civilian colours, so we're going to go with painting his top in a burnt red, which is quite a nice colour, which is Vallejo 70814 burnt red. It's quite a nice colour, this one is. I quite like this. It's quite a handy one to have in the range. So again, don't need lots of paint. So we're not trying now to paint the whole thing in one thick colour. We're using the colours below now to come through, which will change the top colour. So we're just working our way around now, being tidy. So yeah, obviously hands are close together, touching, resting on this piece of wood, which really helps to sort of hold it better. We're just cutting in. So if you can keep it all neat with your paintwork, where the one close starts and one stops, it just helps produce a tidier figure. To be honest with you, being neat is probably the more important than actually painting him in a good fashion, really. So we're nearly there now. We're just going back to the other side. Because the paint is so watery and so thin, it's always worth, when you're going to start and commit to an area, is to keep going till it's finished. So if your house is burning down, don't worry about it. Get this figure painted first. This is more important. Briefly. So his collar around his neck, and we aren't far off this section being completed. It's quite a simple figure to paint, to be honest with you. Some of them can be a little bit tasking depending on the poses. Okay, that's that. We'll let that dry now, and we'll move on to the next step. With the red now dry, it's time now to move over to his dungarees. Again, he's a sort of a civilian, so we can choose the colours. We're going to use blue. Excuse the pot, we're about to run out of it, but this is war paint, deep blue. I find this blue quite a nice kind of colour. Other blues are available. So literally just put this on. So you may have noticed that I'm using one of these paint pads to paint on. I find really good to work from. You can use a wet palette, but I find with these that you can work out how much water to apply from the paint neat, where on a wet palette the paint is already wet, so it can be quite diluted quite quickly and end up with a mess. But for me this works. I do sell these as well. They are available to purchase should you wish. So we'll start off, plenty of water. You don't want to go too thick again. You're not trying to paint them in one go. We'll start to apply the blue. People ask me about doing the blues for British Rail. There isn't, or I've yet to find a blue paint that actually is any good out the bottle. I quite like using this Warhammer deep blue and a bit of black paint and sort of a custom mix, and I find this works quite well. I also find acrylics can be, because it's basically a plastic paint, can be a little bit shiny, especially the darker colours. So using water to break the paint down a little bit helps. Also, I found using a hairdryer to dry the figure quicker, but also the heat helps to, or appears to, kill the shine, which something I sort of discovered as obviously I paint a lot of these per day. I need to work in a reasonable time frame to get some figures done. So a little accidental tip there. So we're just painting around. Some figures can be a bit difficult to paint, so it's always just worth moving the figure around to make it easier for yourself, really. sort of weird angles. Okay, you can see, there you go. The back of his webbing on this one appears to crisscross, so we go from left to right and right to left. So we go over the top and down. Just want to catch the other strap and then go back the other way. Like so, and then we're going to join up on the tops. It's almost sort of doing it in 3 bits really. Just make sure the straps front and back join up in a convincing way. We do like that. Okay, just wash the brush out. Right, so we'll let it dry a second. With the blue now dry, nice little job now is doing the boots. So this one we're using Vallejo black or matte black, which is 70950. It's called black, fair enough. A little bit of water, and again with it be on the paint pad, just rejuvenate the water, the paint with the water again, and off to go. So we set about painting his boots. Again, these are work boots, so sort of ankle kind of height. He's not wearing long boots, so just be aware of what they're painting. Just be aware of what they're wearing. I'm going to paint his boots down inside the legs. Try and do this so we can see. Okay, back to the heels. Okay, so his boots are now done, and as we've got the black out as well again, probably the last time. I've just literally, it's pardon the pun, but just clocked he's got a watch on. So we'll add the watch again. So you don't want the paint to run away, so a bit more thicker than the rest of him probably. And then again, just catch his watch strap around. Again on the back side too. Make sure it joins up, it does, yeah, just under inside his wrist. Okay, so that'll dry. That's his. Right, okay, so we've got the paintbrush itself. So for that one, we're going to use Vallejo US Field Drab, brown mostly, 70873 for that one. A little shake, don't need a great deal, so we're going to go with that. Brush again, kind of know the drill now, bit of water again. And now we're into the paintbrush itself. So obviously the handle, the body is brown because it'd be wood, or I'm going to do it to wood anyway at least. Paint that in quite like that. And obviously the inside, again fingers touching, stop the shakes. Like so. That's his brush done. What we'll do as well, we're going to add a little bit of brown. This is the beauty with a pad, so you can sort of mix and do what you want with it. So we're going to pitch a bit of black and a bit of brown, mix it together. We're going to give him a bit of hair as well. I think he's getting a cold head there. So again, I'm going to add a bit of hair to him, so it doesn't appear to have an awful lot of hair, this chap doesn't. So we're going to do sort of side and back of the head. I think the hardest figures to paint are the ones with have very thin hair because on top, because you still have the flesh coming through, but obviously you want to show they got hair too. And trying to create texture with the paint is pretty impossible, to be honest. So we're going to do that. It's important just to do the little sideburns too, just a little bit, just has a little bit of detail. So although I'm obviously painting an O gauge figure, this technique is applied to 00 as well, and even N gauge if you can see. You're a better person than I am if you can. So he's actually just going to do this around here, a bit more, just making sure his hair is equal, both sides, which I think it appears to be. Okay. Then bristles. So you could go one more here and add a colour to the bristles as if he's been dipping it in the paint. But for us, he's just got a brand new brush. So he's okay. On there. Okay, and one last thing to do is the clock face on his wrist. So one chance here, so plate's a bit more thicker than normal, literally one little dab on his wrist. And I reckon that's done.
Well, let's confess, Dan, that is brilliant.
Thank you.
And there's some lessons there to be learned. And you only used one brush throughout, did you?
Yes, one brush without, yeah.
And yeah, right.
You'll go.
Might go. What could possibly go wrong?
Save me.
Right. So we'll cut now and we'll get the a 00 gauge figure out, ready for me to make a mess of.
Fine.
Beautiful.
Let's do it. Okay.
Well, I do hope you found part 1 interesting. The thing was, it was going to be one movie, but it was actually just over an hour long, so hence I've cut it into a part 1 and part 2. It's me with a 00 figure in part 2, and rest assured, things don't always go according to plan, but that's just the nature of the beast, really, isn't it? That's what the learning experience is all about. I did mention about my couple of little blotches. I've had a little bit of a skin cancer scare, so I had to put some creams on, and it's turned an unsavoury kind of blotchy effect for a couple of months, but hopefully that will heal. Anyway, so this was part 1. Part 2 is in 1 week's time, so please stay tuned. And in the meantime, there's the old patrons button if you'd like to become a patron. And there's the subscriber button, because you must be a subscriber. Come on. And there's a video here and here. And I'll see you in 1 week's time. Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.